Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Howard Greenberg, and together with Graham Akers and Jesse Gallagher, we're going to be your hosts for today's webinar. We have three folks from HCL today who are going to speak about something new, and the LotusScript Toolkit for Volt. So before we do, just a little bit of housekeeping. Here's our agenda. So we got Paul Withers, Jason Roy Gary, and Rocky Oliver from HCL. And a reminder, many of you have probably been to our webinars before. If you want to ask any questions, please do so. Use the questions pane in the GoToWebinar interface. Ask your questions, and then at the end, we're going to respond to your questions verbally. So we will not be putting answers to your questions in the questions pane. The reason we do that is so everything gets recorded. So we are going to post this up on YouTube. Which is the most asked question? Is this being recorded? Yes, it will be on the OpenNTF YouTube channel. So also, if you have any questions about OpenNTF not related to today, we do have OpenNTF.slack.com. Feel free to join in the discussions, and we welcome any questions. And even more importantly, welcome people who want to come in and help the organization. Remember, we are just a group of volunteers. However, we do have two very important sponsors, among others. But HCL has really helped out OpenNTF. They made a significant contribution, which helps fund webinars like this, contests like hackathons, running our group. And in normal times, we also donate and send a lot of money back to the different user group activities that happen in real life, or I should say person to person. And Prominic is also a great sponsor. They basically donate our whole IT infrastructure, the servers and everything else, as well as the personnel to handle the system admin. So thanks to both HCL and Prominic. So as I mentioned, this is a volunteer organization. So we're welcome to have any help we can get, either on projects or helping run the organization or whatever. If you have some ideas you want to bring forward, we're always open to ideas. So let's see. At that point, let's turn it over so we can get started to Paul. Unless, Jason, you want to show the snow first? You're still on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I can show the snow if anybody wants to see it.
Okay, I'll make you the presenter. So
awesome.
For those of you who are not in the U.S., especially in the Northeast, there's a major blizzard going on, and Jason lives in the heart of it. So he said he's going to show us a snowstorm since it's almost Christmas.
Why not?
So let me make you the presenter. And then when you're done, Jason, just say the word and I'll turn it over to Paul.
Sounds like a plan. Hang on a second. Let me see here. How do I share an app? This.
You can share.
This is a there we go. This is a live shot of my backyard. I don't think the kids are going to be swinging on the swing set today.
But it looks like a nice hill for sledding.
It is actually. It's a nice hill. The building on the right is my barn. It has 90 solar panels on it. Right now, they are producing 0.0 watts. And let's see here. This is optimistically called my driveway.
Hopefully, you have a plow to clean that off.
After I have this talk, I am the plow.
Okay, not by hand, I hope.
No, but here's the backyard. For reference, those are air conditioners, which I don't think I'm going to be needing today. On the right, so it's and no, I'm not paranoid. I just love cameras. Sorry, I'm very geeky. But yeah, here's a shot on the other side. So I'll stop sharing. And you can go ahead and grab it for Paul. But
okay.
Hello everyone and a happy New Year. It's a wintry day here in rural New Hampshire.
Well, living in Florida, I kind of miss that.
It's Graham here. I was just going to say, as a Canadian kid who grew up in that kind of weather, a word of warning as a parent, that slide, make sure your kids aren't going down it, standing up on their snow boots. I've probably experienced that myself, so just a word of warning.
No, I absolutely hear you. It looks a lot of fun until you actually go and do it. And being in New Hampshire, there's rocks everywhere. It's the granite state here in
Yeah.
New Hampshire. So not necessarily a very safe thing to do. And apparently we have 6 more hours of what you just saw in snow. So we may have 2 feet before we're done. Let's get started. I'm super excited about what we've done with this toolkit and how we can work together as a community. Paul?
Paul, you're the presenter now.
Yeah, so hopefully you're all seeing my screen now.
Yep, we are.
Yep.
Me. So, Jason, do you want to give an introduction into Volt MX, since you're probably more aware of it than anyone?
Sure. So we signed a deal with a company called Temenos. They're based in Switzerland at the beginning of June of this year to jointly own the intellectual property of a product called Quantum. Now, interestingly enough, Temenos purchased Quantum from a company called Coney, which was a startup based originally, funny enough, in Orlando, Florida. And we brought it in specifically for a couple of things. The first thing is it has a phenomenal IDE called Visualizer, which we're changing, and I'm sure everyone here will appreciate this, to call it Iris. Can't imagine where we came up with that name. It's a very clever IDE, and it allows you to build native iOS, native Android, native Apple Watch and Android wearable, PWAs, native Windows apps, and we'll be adding more destinations in a bit. MX, by the way, stands for multi-experience. And it allows you to build these things using a variety of components. A lot of it's drag and drop. And the programming language that it uses is JavaScript. So ES5, we'll be adding ES6 and TypeScript to it. And it runs on Macs and Linux and Windows. And we brought it into the fold specifically to empower and do those kinds of things and have an IDE that could really allow us to go to the next level. It also has a component that is called Fabric. We're going to rename it to Foundry. And this is a middleware layer that does some incredible things around being able to manage and manipulate APIs. So it allows you to have a plugin that's, say, connecting to Salesforce or ServiceNow or SAP or PeopleSoft or whatever backend you want to connect to, and then manipulate the payload so it's appropriate to whatever application is consuming it, such that the application only connects to Foundry, and then Foundry handles going to the multi-endpoints to be able to get the data that's needed. I don't think it's a surprise, and Andrew and Mambi and I think, said it. Oh, great, yes. We're going to do some incredible things with this technology, not just as a product itself, but bringing it into the fold into Domino. As I said, it builds once. You build once, you can deploy everywhere. It's the same code, so that you can have the same code between iOS and Android and still have native apps. It does great integrations, and we do things like, VR and AR, and it has connectivity to NLP and things like that. It does some really amazing things. But for all of you, I think the exciting thing about Volt MX is, and I think Andrew and I actually said it the third day of Digital Week back in November, we will be bringing LotusScript to this IDE. We will be bringing all of the capabilities that many of us love and cherish from the Domino platform into this IDE, so that you'll be able to work with your Domino applications directly inside it. You'll be able to use the power of all of this connectivity. You'll be able to map these various piece parts together using the APIs. You'll be able to do all of these things with the power of Volt MX, with Domino and your existing Domino applications. So it's going to be a bit of a journey. We've got a long road ahead, but I'm very excited that we have this new sets of capabilities that we can offer to everyone. And it's Paul, I give him all the credit in the world for this, who, I came, what was it, Paul? I came to you and said, we've got to find a way to expose the power of Domino to Volt MX and expose the power of Volt MX to Domino. And it's
Yeah,
Paul
I
who
think
came
it
up
was.
with the. Yeah, I think that's the only instruction I gave you.
Well, yeah, I think it was a couple of months ago that you came to me with that, and the first day or so was absolute panic, I have to admit, wanting to run away. And then I basically came to you with slides that are basically a bulk of this deck. So we've got the Foundry part there, and it does great object mapping, as well as which is suitable for going off to Salesforce, for example, or MongoDB or SQL databases. But it's also got the REST services. And one of the things that hit me very quickly was that, yes, we could just treat Domino as another object store, as another with kind of basic data mapping, but there's a number of aspects there, some of which we could fix in an object mapping, like Domino field types. And I'm not even talking about rich text there. Date fields, for example. When you're coming from another application, or you're coming from an application, then you typically want Booleans. The way we handle that, well, it's handled in different ways by different developers in Notes. It could be 1 and 0, it could be yes and no, it could be 1 and 0 as text. So there's those kind of things that don't really readily map neatly. And the fact that not every field should be rewrite. If you can't see a document, typically in HTTP response codes, that will be a 404, resource not available. But actually it's a 403. It's that you don't have access to it. And if we just do it as object mappings, then we're ignoring probably hundreds of millions of lines of business logic, which is the LotusScript, which we need to deal with.
Not just to deal with, Paul, right? We need to empower that business logic to do other things.
Yeah. So kind of taking a step back and looking at the architecture, we have this integration service, Foundry, in the middle. And one of the areas that it also does is it does some very neat workflow as well. Visual workflow, which is one of the areas that I haven't dug into in depth, but again, it's something that I'm sure I will be. But you've got the database on one side, and you've got the Volt MX Iris app, or Volt MX Iris, where you build the app and it's then deployed up and accessed through Foundry or previewed locally. But we've got all this, all the forms and views, the kind of architecture of the application, as well as this business logic and agents sitting in the NSF. And that shouldn't really just be taken out to Foundry. There's been a lot of investment in securing the data in that NSF, and that's the right place for it. If we were to transfer that out to a middleware layer, then that's fine for a transfer, but then how can you, as the person supporting the application, be 100% certain that when an end user comes to you and says, this document showing as approved, how come? Because I thought they weren't allowed to approve it without it going through a proper workflow. You then need to be able to say how that document was set to approved, where the update came in from. And that's an aspect which If you're abstracting out the business rules, it becomes harder to manage that area. So keeping that business logic and closer to the database itself and within the NSF makes a lot of sense. It's one of the benefits that Domino has over something like MongoDB, for example. We can keep that a lot closer. But the challenge is then, how do we reuse it? In order to address that problem, I think it's important then to step back and look at how that LotusScript code is used in the Notes client and the steps that it goes through, some of which are we take for granted. So first off, an action is triggered. So that may be a button in a form, it may be a query save event, it may be a combination of the two, it may be a web query save agent. Then your script takes over and something gets passed to it. It may be an in-memory document, it may be an existing document, it may be a bunch of documents, but your LotusScript code runs over those and saves it to the database. When we try and look at reusing that code and the flow that needs to happen for Volt MX, then we've got the action triggered on the application. It needs to go through an integration service in Volt MX Foundry. There is some power there. You can do some manipulation, something that's not exposed in the application. So you can play about with the content that's then being passed back to Domino and that's then being passed back to the application. So there is some power there. But on the Domino side, the Domino code will need to parse whatever information is coming in. Then it needs to do the updates and save the document. So there's refactoring that has to happen. And that's not exclusive to Volt MX. That's standard for wherever you're trying to reuse business logic from outside of the Notes client or the Domino server. And the key here is, yes, regardless of what we have, there's going to need to be some refactoring. The key is minimizing that refactoring and giving you a framework or building a framework that can do a lot of that parsing and sending response back in a standard way. If you've got Notes UI classes in the code, then you're not going to be able to just reuse it as is. If you try and call that code from that script library or that agent from outside of the Notes client, then you'll get error creating product object. There's nothing that can be done about that. Similarly, if it's set to run on selected documents, that's not going to work when triggering it from the web. So yes, there is going to need to be changes, but it's a case of trying to manage that and minimize the amount of changes. When we're talking about how to get a handle on that LotusScript code, how to trigger it, then when we're talking about running it from a middleware layer that's up in the cloud, REST is the typical HTTP communication. Web services with SOAP is still in use in some places. I've been involved in supporting LotusScript web services. REST tends to be much more pervasive. And once you're outside of Domino, agents are then the entry point, but those agents aren't designed to receive REST services or to send responses back to a REST service. So the starting point that I came to this with was, well, what if they could be? And this slide is pretty much the list that I went to Jason with as my plan for what I wanted to try a proof of concept to be able to do. Developing in the open with the community was a key part of that. And the acceptance that local replicas and Nomad Mobile is out of scope. If you're working from a local replica, the assumption is that there's a lack of connectivity, and therefore you're not going to be interacting with Foundry from there or from any kind of cloud-based middleware. The key was coming up with some kind of generic payload that worked for what you need to pass in and what needs to come out. And then it was a case of coming up with some classes for building and receiving those calls from Volt MX Foundry or any kind of REST service or any kind of HTTP service. Wrappers for processing the request body, because you can pass in a request body to an agent. Building the headers, because headers are going to need to be passed back to the REST service or the HTTP endpoint that is calling the agent. And there's going to need to be some conversion from a JSON object to notes fields. And a response is going to need to be made, and it should be as easy as possible for you to build up that response. And if possible, I wanted to try and come up with a way to make those APIs for building up the response body fluent. What that means is that typically when you create a notes JSON object and pass that into a notes JSON navigator, what you get back is the notes JSON object. So you need to get that, get the notes JSON navigator again and call the next JSON object. If we can add a notes JSON object to a notes JSON navigator and get the notes JSON navigator back, then we can just chain those. We can do add JSON object, add JSON object, and make the code a lot more terse. And the other key aspect there is that if you're calling agents over the web, they may not run quickly. Your agents, notes agents, Domino agents are not designed to always take no more than a minute, 2 minutes. Sometimes they take a bit longer. Even if they take a minute, then it may be too long. Being able to run that process asynchronously and call back to something external to Domino to allow you then to create a flow is, I think, a key requirement for reusing agents. And OpenLog. OpenLog is something that I've used extensively. Julian Robichaud did an amazing job with OpenLog well over 10 years ago now. I don't think it's changed within OpenNTF for 10 years. It does what it needs, and it captures a lot of extremely useful information for troubleshooting. So that was a key part of it. So that was the wish list that I went to Jason with what I wanted to try and achieve. I think it was one sprint later that I came back with something that worked, and we published it up on HCL Tech Software GitHub. This is HCL's central GitHub for all of our open source projects. We've tried to use topics. You'll see there the little blue sections over on the right hand side for Volt MX, Domino, and developers. So we wanted to use topics to make it easy to navigate to particular repositories for particular products and particular audiences. But we've put up the first version there. So let's have a look at the code. So to demonstrate it all, I like NodeRed. It's nice and easy for kind of putting together middleware. It's low code for calling REST services. So I've got this NodeRed dashboard. So in the GitHub, we've got the Web Agent Framework database. To configure this dashboard, we need the URL for the server, the database name, a username and password that has access, and because we're wanting to play around with data, then the XPages extension library demo database is a very good database for just having dummy data that you can then interact with. We've got a document, a contact document that we're going to pull back, that we're going to manipulate, and also another document, another contact document, and that contact has threads that they've created. And we've got a callback URL to NodeRed. If you're wanting to call back to your own PC, then I would highly recommend using ngrok. It creates a temporary tunnel to your own PC that you can then reuse. And I'm just wondering, hopefully that tunnel is still up and running, but we shall see shortly. Actually, let me just restart that. Because I think that was actually yesterday. So we'll just paste in the new one and submit that. So we've got a demo agent, and this is going off to a cloud server, and it's come back with some information. So let's drill down into what that's doing. So the configuration is setting a bunch of stuff. It's also setting an authorization header, basic auth, base 64 encoding, the username and password that was there. And that's then going to be put into the headers. So we're using basic authentication to the agent, and we're calling an agent called test agent. We've got query string parameters in there, and we've got a payload that is being passed across, including an array of documents. And that array includes names. So let's hop across and have a look at that agent that it called. So that's just a normal agent that we're calling with question mark open agent. The main difference that we've got in there is that it's using a script library that is a wrapper for the information that's being passed in. It's up on a remote server at the moment, so hopefully this will, yep, we've connected now. So it's using this class NodeAgent underscore JSON HTTP helper. I'll come back to the next line in a moment, but we've also got is web request. So what that's doing is when the agent is triggered, we're creating the NodeAgent JSON HTTP helper using the document context, which could be any document depending upon where it's triggered from. But if it's triggered from the web, then it will have a request underscore method field. It'll have a load of other fields, but the request underscore method field is not one that I've seen stored in documents. I've seen things like query string actually being stored in a document. So I wanted to use something that was different from that, that wouldn't likely be stored, and that identifies the context document that this is running from as a web request from a REST service. We've then got is valid, and I'll come back to that with one of the later demos, because at the moment for the JSON HTTP helper, it's really just running through extracting the fields and at the end setting the valid to true. We can identify the method that is being used for the agent, because an agent can be called with any particular method. It can be the HTTP request, it can be a get, it can be a post, it can be a put, it can be a delete, it can be an update if that's been enabled for the server. And typically, regardless of what HTTP method is being passed into an agent, it will just run. By being able to extract the method, this then allows you to return a 405 error, which is what you would normally get with a REST service if a REST service only allowed GET requests on that endpoint, but you posted a post to it. So we can do some validation there and treat this as a normal REST service. We can get the content type, the base URL. So let's just go across to Notes and open up the OpenLog, and we'll see the information that logged out. It's logged out here the base URL for the server that we sent across. Now, there are undocumented methods for getting that, but we're making a REST service, a web call into this, so we may as well just extract that from the call that's coming in. We can get the keys for the HTTP headers, and we can see here that there's a bunch of headers that it passed in, as well as the authorization and content type that were actually specified. And we can do GetHeader to get a particular header. So typically in the past, I've used an app ID and an app secret for that are passed into the headers that my code has, and that the valid place that's calling it has, and it's not intended to be shared. It's not, if it's being called from a server, like in the case of NodeRed, NodeRed is calling, is triggering this server, then it allows you to ensure that the information that's being passed into this agent is coming from a trusted source. query parameters as well, extracting those, getting the body as a JSON object, and then we've got the functionality then for parsing that JSON object. If you use the Notes.json navigator and try to extract values out, it's possible, and it has a lot of flexibility, but you really need to kind of drill down through Notes.json objects and getting the value. I wanted to add specific methods just to easily extract those values. Coming back up at the top to the set log error on bad pointer, and that is relevant when we're finding values via a pointer. And I've got to have a shout out here to Rocky, Stefan, and Bob Balaban for their advice on this. The find string by pointer returns a Boolean, true or false, as to whether or not it's been able to find it. The first parameter is the JSON path that we want to navigate down through. The second parameter is an object, here it's a string, in which to store the outcome from that variable. That means you can use an if statement to see whether that value exists and structure your code accordingly. And I think Rocky does that in a demo later. But the set log error on bad pointer means that if that variable doesn't exist, then we will log an error for it. So as someone supporting this, you can see that it tried to get a variable from the body that didn't exist. Now, obviously, if that's an optional one, then you don't want to get notified of that. So by default, it's false. You set it to true if you want to be notified. And as we see here, that's where we've got that error logged. So we can actually pick up on that. We had the docs array, and this is the old style that you would see for interacting with a Notes.json navigator, that you would find JSON array by pointer and get the first element value. With find string by pointer, we can create a path that will allow us to just get the first name from the first entry. And as well as string, we've got double, we've got various options there. What we've also got, and at the moment this is just handling one level down, but get Notes.json elements from array. So this is looking at the docs array and getting the first name elements from all entries and returning them as an array that you can then do a for all loop round. So you can get the names and extract those out. So we've got 1 Fred, 2 John, 3 Jane, because we're adding the counter first and then the first name's value. So it should make manipulation of that content in your code much easier. And then it comes to the responses. So add response header, that's where we've got the fluent method. So we can chain them all on a single line. Get JSON response body gets a handle on the body that you can then populate with JSON elements. Append element fluent, the Notes JSON navigator has append element, which returns the element. Append element fluent returns the JSON navigator, so we can just chain them. So we've got hello world, we've got append array, and within that array, because we want to return the array to be able to append the elements, then that's returning the array, and we can chain then appending individual elements to it. If you've used agents over the web, out of the box, it will just return status 200. And that's not particularly useful if you've got a bad request, if you've got a body content that's not suitable. So we can close request with error, with an error message and a status code. So it's bad request there, just a generic status code error, which is an error 500, if there was something triggered as an error that we're not expecting. So there's the flexibility of the status codes being returned, and so that you don't have to remember which status code is which, we've got constants for those. Now you'll notice that we haven't done a send of the response if it was successful, and yet if we come back to the dashboard, we got this content. I don't know about you, but I knew that if I was using this, I would forget to call HTTP request.close, or I think it's close request, but I'd forget on numerous occasions, and I'd wonder why it wasn't working, and then end up 15 minutes later banging my head against the desk because I'd forgotten. So the delete method of the HTTP request, which gets called when the agent finishes and it cleans up, checks whether the request has been closed, and then automatically does it for you, so you don't have to remember that. The Volt MX agent, now that one is using the Volt MX helper, and the Volt MX helper is it's just got a standard payload of the UNID of the document that you want to act upon, database path for that document, a payload of fields and values that you want to update, and a return items array of fields that you want to get back. This is just a default expected payload that this class, which extends the JSON helper, that this class looks to use. And the one key thing that it's expecting is that you're wanting to act upon a document. So only if it can find an UNID that was passed in, only then will it set valid to true. And we're also specifying what the Boolean values for true and false should be there. And then we've got some useful helper methods there. .action.unid will get the UNID that was passed in. GetActionDoc will get a handle on that particular document. UpdateActionDoc will pass the body in and update the fields, and add return fields to response body, then takes those fields, gets the field values, and passes them into a JSON object to be return back. So hopefully that should significantly minimize the amount of code that you need to write for handling the request. And to give that an example of how that should work and how you might need to have code from two different places. We've got this demo names and threads, which updates a document and updates the threads for it. And from this side, we've got that same agent. So just to allow you to be absolutely certain, that one is calling, over here, that's calling the update contact and threads BE, which is this action, which is designed to run on the current document, and it prompts me for the new username and updates that document. And if I go all threads by author, it updates that particular thread as well. If I run it again from over here, from the dashboard, that thread has been updated. So that agent in the extension library database, I've put the central code for updating the threads in a script library, which would be typically where you would have that if it's being called from multiple places. And that just gets all the entries based upon the check name and updates the author with the new name. Around that, we've got the helper, and we're using document context, so we can identify if it's a web request or whether it's being triggered from the notes client. If it's being triggered from the notes client, we've got an input box to get the new name, and we're getting a handle on, and we're changing the first name and last name in the document, and saving that document, getting a handle on the old name so that we can then update. If it's from the web, then we're checking whether it's a valid request, getting a handle on the action doc's first name and last name before we start, so that we're getting the check name. Then we're calling update action doc, which, if we look back here, this one, yes, we're changing the first name and adding a test val and test boolean fields to it. But update action doc updates all of that. We might need to do some validation after we've passed those values in, but this time we're not, so we're just doing save, getting the new name, and then calling that central update threads method. And then if it's a web request, we're passing back the return fields and the threads updated count. If it's from the notes client, we're just doing threads updated. And again, in the error handling, if it's a web request, close the request with an error, otherwise just logging the error. So yes, there is always going to need to be some changes, but this will hopefully minimize the amount of changes. We may also have agents that are going to take a long time. So we may want to trigger them asynchronously from question mark open agent. You can't do that. From here, we've got a processing and we've got a request ID. That's calling a run async agent, run agent async agent with a payload of database agent name to run in that database, method to pass back, and the callback URL, which is here on NodeRed with this API callback and an UNID to get a handle on. That API callback is coming into here, and that's then going to update the information here. In our web request database, wrong server, in the web request database, we're creating a document and we can see it's here as a status of pending. We've then got a scheduled agent running periodically to pick up these documents that are pending and process them. So that should happen any moment. And that's just a scheduled agent. So it's the process async requests, and it's just calling an agent.run on those. It's passing all the information from here to a context document that it's then doing run with document context on, so that you can get a handle on this document, the payload that was passed in, everything from there, and run your agent asynchronously from. That's then processed, and we come back here, and I think it has struggled to get that, but that will print right back the information back to here. So that's everything from my part. It's failed to get here. Let's now move on to Rocky to talk about his experience of actually using it. Howard, do I need to pass control to Rocky?
Thanks.
Or
Let me see if I can do it. Change presenter to me. Okay, and then let's see, let's try showing screen. Let me pick a screen. Wow, I can't tell which screen it's. Okay, hold on. Is it that one? Yeah, I think it's that one. Sweet. All right. Hi, guys. All right, so this demo was actually originally done for Digital Week. I assume everybody can see what I'm showing, which should be my notes client and the DDE behind it.
Yep, that's working.
Sweet. All right, so when we were doing this demo for Digital Week, we wanted to try to base it off what would happen in the real world, which is, you know, you've been building Domino databases for decades. All of a sudden, this new technology comes into the forefront. You've got a mandate to present your old app into new form factors such as watches and everything else, or iPads, etc. So how do you do that? And Volt MX makes it easy, especially with the toolkit that Paul just showed. So I took the old Nifty 50 expenses database, and I did a little bit of a refresh on it just to make it where it was usable. But you could tell, I mean, this is R3, R4 design from the old days.
Oh, you have to tell them the date you found on this.
Oh, I was about to do that. So
okay.
Here's what we're talking about. If you'll look, this database originally is, first off, you'll notice there are flat identifiers still in here. I used to work with Doug, so this has been around a while. And then this response document here, which is a form, was originally created in 1987. So
that's 2 years before the product was launched.
Right. So this is literally one of the first things ever created on the Notes client, pre 1.0. So the database has been around a while. And so I thought that would be a cool challenge to see, can we take this and present it into a modern form factor? The way we did that is we started out over here in, oh, please come back. Of course I come back. Yeah, it's gonna make me sign in again. That's just great. See, I stood away too long. All right, so what we have over here is inside this Append 60 is the example for using Volt MX, tying it into so that it will call a particular agent that I wrote to do approvals and rejections from an iPad or a watch or whatever else you've got, whatever form factor you happen to present using Volt. So we're passing in, for this particular example, we're just going ahead and passing in our authentication statically. But you could also set it as a part of the header that you pass in like it's done over here. I forgot where it's at. I think it's under expenses. Yeah, so the parameters we pass in on the header, where was it at? Is it response? Oh, no, I'm sorry, I was in the right place. Header. You can see you could actually pass in a session bearer on the header if you wanted to, instead of doing a static login. But for the example, we just decided to do a static login. So we set up a call in Volt MX, the Foundry, to my agent, which is this process approve request open agent. We're going to pass in a very small payload. All we're going to pass in is the UNID of the underlying expense report that we're wanting to update, the approval status, which will be either approve or reject, and then whoever the approver's name is. So when you make the call, this payload gets passed in. That would, and when that happens, that's when my agent takes over. So here we go, good old-fashioned LotusScript. Now,
Rocky, are you able
yes,
to increase the font on your?
I can. Yeah, I guess I probably have it set way too small. So sorry. Hold on. Let's do that. Fonts and colors. We'll crank it up big. Hoorah! Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. So, now, a couple of things about this agent. I figured that this thing would eventually get tossed over the wall so you guys could take a look at it. So I've added a lot of extra comments to explain what's going on, which I'm known for that anyway, so bear with me. And I used a really weird trick in here that I'm going to show you as well to make this as small and tight as possible. One of the things I have is, as you can tell, the only thing I'm loading is the script library, which is the Volt MX helper that Paul demonstrated or walked through earlier. And I went ahead and put in here what other libraries it happens to load, just to make it easier so you can understand, where your code's coming from when you call it. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is I wanted this agent to be able to be used whether it's a first approver or second approver. If you look at the expense report itself, there are 2 approver levels. So I didn't want to have 2 separate agents and have to have double the code for basically the same amount of work. So to get around that, I decided to create my own data type and tie it to a list, which a list is like a hash map. And in my data type, I basically created 2 properties. So that you could think of this as kind of like a light class in LotusScript. So I'm using a list, and the 2 things I'm going to store are the approver name field, which is the field that contains the approver's name, whether it's the first line or second line approver, and the corresponding status for that approver. Back in my code, the way that gets used is, I'll show you, it's going to be down in here, but let me get through the rest of this. So this is what you were seeing before when Paul was walking through his example agents. I set up a new MX helper. I go ahead and tell it what to do if it hits on a bad pointer. I validate that it's a web request and that it's a valid request, that it's a post request, and so on. So this is just kind of generic stuff. You don't really have to do all of this, but you need at least the request and valid. Next steps. This is where I'm using the find stream by pointer before. Remember, in my payload, I pass in the status and the approver's name. So this is where I grab those and assign them to variables so I can use them. Now, I also use my own error blocks. Since we don't have try catch fail in LotusScript yet, hint, hint, I wanted to, I like casting my own errors and controlling the errors that happen in my code. So basically, in my little error block down here, I have a select case. So I know that there are particular types of errors I'm going to cast, and I want to be able to use to close my request with the particular type of error that is appropriate. These are this HTTP status bad request is stored actually in a part of the HTTP constants. So I can pass those in and go ahead and close out the request. Remember that what Paul had said earlier is the response body automatically closes everything for you, so you don't have to handle that. The same thing goes with the close request with error. It takes care of cleanup and everything else. All right, so back up here. So I'm throwing errors if I get bad requests and what they are. Now, this is the part that I was talking about before where I was using my own little list class light. Basically, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go into the expense doc. I'm going to grab the approver names, where the approver name 1 and 2. And for each of the approver names, I'm going to set which field I got them from. So if the name was in approver 1, then it gets set to approver name 1. Same thing for the status field, which this is the field that was on that original expense report form for the status for each of these approvers. So if the name is Jason Gary and he was the approver 1, then his name would be set here and I would know he was the first approver. If Paul was the second, then his name would be set here. Now, the reason that becomes useful is I check the status based on whether it's an approve or reject. I set the field, and then I know that which field to set based on the approver's name. So I pass in my approver's name, which is my key for my list, and I know that the approver status field is this or this, and then I set it to either approved or rejected. Same thing goes for that's for the approve or rejected, sorry. If I don't recognize what the status is coming in, then I'll throw a bad request that I didn't get what I expected. So once I've set the approval or rejected status appropriately, then I'll go ahead and set, there's another field that needs to be updated as well in the way that the original expense report app was set. And its field name is basically the same as the status field up here, but has a sub 1 under it. So, or for the approver name, I'm sorry, which approver the current approver is what this is. So basically, I grab that field name, the approver name field, I append on the sub 1, and then I set it to the appropriate value that I had gotten. So that's what that's doing. Now, here I'm using compute with form. This is something we normally don't recommend, right? However, we know how it is. You've got an app that was built umpteen million years ago, and it's had 45 different people that have touched it, and you're not sure what all the code is, getting called all over the place. So in those instances, it's okay to use a compute with form. The nice thing is, though, that we're not forcing it. We're putting the power in the hands of the developer to decide whether a compute with form gets called or not. In this case, I do want to call because I know that there's other processes that happen in the expense report that I want to go ahead and get set based on those field values. So I'll call the compute with form, then I'll save the expense report. Once all of this is done, then it returns back that it was success. So the final thing returned back to the calling code is a success. And then based on how it's coded in Volt MX, you could actually do something with that status. Like you could have better error trapping or error handling if it throws an error condition. You could have it call some follow-on workflow process based on the status as well. So as you can tell, we're looking at a total of 105 lines of code with a bunch of extra stuff that's probably not even needed with the comments and everything to integrate a 30-year-old database with 21st century technology, which is pretty cool. I think that's it for what I wanted to show. So I'm going to hand it back to Paul.
Thank you. Let me go my screen again and come back into the presentation. So as I mentioned on my wish list, the desire here is to build this with the community and to build this openly. If you look on the OpenNTF Slack channel, Slack workspace at the moment, there's already a channel on there for Volt MX LotusScript Toolkit. And what we want to do is to work with the community and build this out so that with the expertise of both sides, we can build up a toolkit which does what you need it to do, and that we have a bunch of people who have the ability to add features to this, deal with, pick up any bugs with it, test it, and build documentation for it, build samples for it as well. So we want a community around this, and that's a very different way of working to what what typically happens with product open source solutions around Domino, and even open source solutions up on OpenNTF. Typically, it's just one developer or a couple of developers, and it's tied to those people remaining with the product and remaining interested in and having the time to contribute to it. So there's certainly a number of features that need to go in there. I've started some handling on date times, but it's a challenging area with time zones. But we need to build towards a minimum viable product, and build a team, allocate the roles, and plan towards a release, which Jason, you would like to have that for around March time of next year.
Yes, I would.
So reach out to us, use the Slack channel, and we want to have a bunch of people working on this. It's up on GitHub. We want people forking this, working on particular features, making pull requests back, and come up with a good way of working with open source for OpenNTF for the new era under HCL. And that's not all. Jason, do you want to talk about your idea for the next evolution of LotusScript?
Yeah, I can, Paul. So we've talked an awful lot, and Paul, thank you so much. Paul, you just did incredible work here. And I'm very grateful for everything that you've done. It's just an amazing amount of work in a short period of time, which is what we do here, right, Paul?
Yep, it's manic.
But look, there's more. I'm not coming here and telling you that LotusScript is the future of what we're going to do, but I am going to tell you that we're going to be investing in it. And I think you heard that from Andrew Manby at Digital Week, for those of you who were there. And we're going to be investing more in it than I think has been done since R5. There is a very good reason why Bob Balaban is on my team. And what I would like, and I'm going to throw down this challenge to you. I have like 50 or 60 LotusScript libraries that I have used over the years that I cut and paste in script libraries every time I build a new app. I don't want to do that anymore. I want us to come up with the Uber LotusScript library of things that just aren't in the basic language, things that we use all the time. Bubble sort's a great example. Linear sort, which is really very, very optimal for some of the things that you want to do inside a Domino database. All sorts of basic little things that are just not in the core language. I want to build the greatest LotusScript library of all time, and I want to do it with all of you. And we're going to open source it. Paul, you brought up that some of these libraries, we don't even know who wrote them. They were written 20 years ago. So some of this stuff we may have to re-implement. And, I'm willing to invest Paul's time, Rocky's time, Bob's time, Devin's time, and others on my team to help. But you're on the phone here. You guys are the experts on what you need. And I'd like your help to go off and build this. And at some point we will, integrate it better. We may find gaps that we identify. You heard Rocky talk about try, catch, fail. That is not a joke. We are going to do that. And in order for all of us to make this transition into this bright future that Paul has talked to you about for the last 45 minutes, and you saw the demo one, we have to do some great things about the past too. So I'm laying down the gauntlet here. I will contribute all the ones I've written via Paul. and the GitHub site that he showed you. But I want to work with you on making these really great. I don't know, Paul, if you wanted to add anything.
Not really.
Okay.
We'll be adding proper attribution too. So if you do contribute something,
Attribution, really?
yeah, to the Scripty 50, we will that's my name for it.
I like it.
We'll give you proper attribution to it, so that you can get your name in at least the code comment lights.
It's true. And we can breathe some, I wouldn't call it new life, but we can make things a little more prescriptive and a little more programmatic for people. I'd like to unlock all of this amazing business logic and all these amazing things that all of us have written over the last 25, 30 years. And in order to do that, we need this library. We're all over the place right now in what we use, and I'd like to see us start working on things together more. And that's all I had on that, Paul.
Yep. So I think I've got one more slide, which is just a link off to Volt MX. We've done a lot of talking about Volt MX here. I created that NodeRed dashboard. NodeRed is very easy to install. It's also got a Docker container for it. But you could, this is just a URL to agents with a payload. You could do it from Postman. If Stefan was here, he'd be saying use the CLI and use a curl command. But there are any kind of ways that you can trigger an agent via HTTP, and if you've got a Domino server anywhere that you can send an HTTP call to that's got the HTTP task running, then you can do that. So
Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the work you did with Keep as well, with the toolkit?
Yeah, so obviously it was mentioned at the factory tour that Keep is going to be coming along in some guise to Domino in the V12 timeframe. So we've kind of taken that payload that you have for the Volt MX helper, and we're using the same kind of payload for triggering agents from Keep. There's some subtle differences. For a start, the database that you call is in the URL as a database parameter. And the other significant one is that Keep defines form action modes. So the form action mode, the person setting up the form action mode defines what fields should be returned, not the person making the REST request, which is what we're having to do really for the Volt MX helper. So apart from that, it will work exactly the same. We've also got async agents running in Keep as well, and not needing a scheduled agent to kick them off. And multi-threading, you can call an agent multiple times, and queuing if there are too many threads running, and you can define which threads. So we've got some very powerful stuff in there, and maybe if people are interested in Keep and haven't seen the information, then maybe we may need a future webinar on that. But there's a lot of synergy between what you need to do with this for being triggered from Domino HTTP or from Keep's HTTP. If you want to know more about Keep, then because I can see that there's a question about that, I would point you towards the replays from Digital Week. Stefan had a very good session on Keep there, which covered a lot of these aspects.
Maybe as we get closer, Paul, we can have, to this audience, we can have Stefan present what is going to be shipping in Keep. That'd be pretty exciting for them.
Yep.
So
yeah,
questions?
Keep's a big deal. I mean, it's kind of the future of what we're doing. It's pretty exciting stuff.
It's 300 plus REST endpoints for Domino. I think it's pretty impressive.
To the full-blown API, which is, and PIM and everything else is pretty cool.
And again, keeping the power in the hands of the people who need to support the data. And I think that's crucial to opening Domino beyond Domino.
And we actually consider security, which is, you know, it's one of the things that a lot of the other libraries have been pegged for in the past is not honoring security. We actually built it in.
You know, it's funny, and I told Steph this, and many of you on the webinar will laugh at this. I told Stefan, thank God you left IBM and went to Salesforce for 2 years, so I could hire you back from them. You can see in what he didn't keep, and I think, you know, Paul Rocky, you can see, and he learned a lot at Salesforce around securing cloud native things, and he's baked that into Keep.
Absolutely.
Just looking at the clock, why don't we, Howard, transition over to some questions?
Sure, Graham. Good idea. I'm going to switch presenters back to me, Paul.
Yep.
And I'd like to thank our speakers, Paul, Rocky, and Jason, for a very interesting presentation. Sounds like this could be the follow-on to other ones, including one or more on Keep. So this webinar, I haven't locked in yet. We're hoping to do another session that, since the one last month was so popular on can't think of the technology.
Domino and Docker. Domino and Docker.
Thank you. I was having a brain freeze. So since that was so popular, we seems to be a lot of interest in that. So we're hoping to line up a great presenter on that, but I haven't gotten confirmation yet. So I don't want to say anything or mention a date, but we are hoping to do that in January. Graham, you had some things coming up next week.
Yeah, just a reminder to everybody that we've organized a community happy hour, actually 3 community happy hours, where we can all jump on a call and enjoy a beverage together, 3 different geos or 3 different time zones across the world on Tuesday. So mark Tuesday the 22nd on your calendar, and if you head over to openntf.org, the details are all there, including the links to the various Zoom calls. So please come along and just have a smile for the community, and we'll be online together before we head off to Christmas.
Oh, very good. That sounds fun. And since we're talking about the holiday season, everyone here at OpenNTF wishes everyone happy holidays, and hopefully 2021 will be better. I know for many of us it was quite a challenge, if not, you know, from a business side, definitely from a personal side. I guess we get to know more about our own houses and maybe even our own families. So hopefully 2021 will be an end to that. Now it's time for questions. I know we have some questions lined up. Just a reminder, you can use the questions pane to ask your questions. And also just to reiterate, we're going to record this, hopefully recording this session, and we'll put that up on our YouTube site along with the slides. Graham, you got the first one?
Yeah, let's jump in here. Andrew gave us a good string of questions to start, so thank you for that. Good to see you online. So the first question is around the ETA. I think you touched on that right at the end there, but Paul, maybe jump in and tell us, when is this going to be available?
Yeah, so it's already available on the on GitHub, github.com/HCL-tech-software. It's already up there. That is a preview that has the basics of text field handling. I think it handles numbers. It also handles Booleans. So you saw we've got those options for defining what a Boolean true and what a Boolean false should be transferred in as. Jason gave me some very nice code on date handling and converting time zones, notes time zones to UTC offsets. So I'm working on integrating that at the moment. But we've got stuff up there. Have a look, have a play with it, see the limitations, create issues on there. Contact us on the Slack channel or on the, I think I've also enabled the discussions area on GitHub now, if you want to get involved. Yeah, this is going to be constantly evolving, and we will be aiming to target a 1.0 release for March. And this will work on 10 plus for the reading. I think it needs 11 for REST service calls out with the JSON navigator. I'm not sure, but they're JSON classes. If someone wanted to convert those JSON classes to not using the JSON ones so that it could work back to, did R3 have LotusScript?
No.
No,
It was
R4
4.
then? Yep, then you could probably have it working with Notes R4.
Let's make a note of making sure that the GitHub link is on the blog post when we refresh it with the link to the video.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so
On
obviously it's
we can put that, actually, Paul, if you can put that in your slides, that would probably be best.
It is in the slides if you look at slide number 14, and it's also got a QR code to it.
Okay,
awesome.
All right, great. Probably the answer to this is yes, but I'll ask anyway. Can people blog about everything they saw today?
No, of course, yes, sorry.
Okay. Whatever you heard today, forget about.
I'm glad I didn't have a sip of Diet Coke when you said that, Paul. I would have made an awkward scene.
Well, we'll jump into the next question then, which is how does authentication work?
Depends how your server works. You're making an HTTP call to the Domino server. So the authentication is there's nothing of any particular. There's nothing specifically around authentication in there. It doesn't need to be.
With Keep, Paul, that'll be a little bit different. We'll offer some options.
Yep.
And some opportunities there.
Okay. How does the URL of the REST request map to a particular agent?
The same way as you would from a traditional Domino web application. You post to Domino hostname / database path / agent name / open agent.
Okay. And then do you guys, is there some sort of test environment that people can start working on or working against?
In the repo, there's the notes folder, which is my usual convention of where I stick an NSF, and that's the web agent framework database. Probably I think once we get to a 1.0 release or a 0.90 release, then we'll package up that NSF and include it in as a binary file in the repo as well. But you can import that into Domino Designer as non-dist project and create an NSF from it, or let me know and I can share a copy of that database. That's the Web Agent Framework database, which I was calling there, and just shows that has all of the script libraries in there, and some of those test agents.
And our last, it isn't even a question, well, it is a question, but we've got our first volunteer to contribute to the LotusScript open source library. Art is asking, how can you contribute LotusScript code?
Let's do Jason's one. To the Uber toolkit. I guess the first step for that is that I'll need to pass this through the open source project office to get a repository set up. Might be a difficult discussion between me and Jason there, and but yes, we're both on the board of that, so that's going to be very straightforward.
So probably through you, Paul, would be the best first step, eh?
Yes, at the moment, kind of collate it, and post Christmas, early into the new year, then we'll have that repository. We'll set up a channel in OpenNTF Slack, and we'll start pulling all of that together. Yeah,
that sounds good. Howard, you
we just had a question just came in, and I think, Paul, you mentioned, just to clarify, you said Domino 10 or higher for reading and for posting back Domino 11. Is that correct?
For the reading and the synchronous agents, then I think the Notes.json we use the Notes.json navigator, the Notes.json element, and the Notes.json array classes for the JSON handling. And I think those came in with V10. I think there was something around the writing of the Notes.json elements that I think only came in with 11. But that's for the asynchronous agents, for calling agents asynchronously, where it needs to create an HTTP request out afterwards if you pass in a callback URL. But really that depends what you want to do with that asynchronous running. There's nothing stopping you having something like NodeRed or HEI or whatever, or any external scheduler, scheduling to kick off an agent async at 3 a.m. in the morning, knowing that it's going to take about 45 minutes like you do with Agent Manager, and scheduling the next one to kick it off at 3:50 so that you've got a bit of leeway, and not using the callback URLs. So there's the it really depends on whether you're wanting to use the callback URLs and what the limitations are in the relevant versions of Domino.
I think part of the question was more around how to consume or use the this library. Is it going to be built into an upcoming release of Domino, or is this something that gets installed, for example, like the extension library used to be?
It's a bunch of script libraries that you copy and paste in. That's the approach at the moment. Personally, I think that gives a lot more flexibility. It means that it's much easier for you to contribute stuff to it. It means that issues can be dealt with a lot more agilely. It means that feature requests you don't have to wait 6 months for. So I think that adds a lot more flexibility in the approach. Jason, I think looked like you were.
I totally agree with you.
There.
I totally agree with you. I would prefer. There's something to be said for baking things into the product, and that's great and that's wonderful and all. But I think we can go faster if we work out in the open, in public GitHub together. And I would prefer to do it that way.
I agree. This is like a downloaded add-on type thing.
Awesome.
And we're saying copy and
All right.
paste in at the moment. We're not saying that there couldn't be interesting, innovative ways to manage integration of LotusScript libraries in the future.
It's very true.
Right, but this makes it very easy to consume and get started today even.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, we are at the bottom of the hour, so we should, Howard, we should wrap up, I think.
Yes, I think that's it. So we'll see everyone and we'll see you next week if you join the holiday gatherings, and otherwise we'll see you in our January webinar. And as always, please join us on our Slack channel, OpenNTF.slack.com, and keep collaborating. Have a good holiday season, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.